All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Adam White, and it is time once again for another Advocacy with Adam update. Several of you have commented about the logo that you saw last time around, and yes, there are stickers. We'll talk more about that here at the end. So, what's going on this month? What do you need to know about what is going on in the world of advocacy here in the state of Alaska? So lots of things to talk about that may not originate in Alaska, but do have some impact for us here in the state. So as you can tell, I'm standing in a different location here in the hangar. Thought I'd mix it up just a little bit. The floats are off. Winter is almost here. And yeah, so wanted to change things up just a little bit. Also not wearing quite as colorful of a Hawaiian shirt this time around, but still aviation related. There's airplanes on here. I picked this shirt up at Oshkosh this year, so I thought I'd go ahead and use that here on the program. So let's go ahead and get started. One thing that we have to be careful of is when you ask a question, are you sure you want the answer? An elder statesman for the state of Alaska, actually one of the folks who actually signed the Alaska State Constitution, Mr. Jack Coghill, was raised here in Nenana, where I live, and he told me one time, he goes, "Son, you don't ever go into a meeting until you know the outcome." This is a little bit similar to this. So if you have a question about a regulation and you're not sure exactly what it means or how it's to be interpreted or to be applied, there is a process to go where you can ask the FAA for a legal interpretation. Now, that happens a lot. And when that happens, the response is now part of what, for the lack of a better term, because I'm not a lawyer, maybe case law. It explains the interpretation, and that interpretation can be used in conjunction with the regulation when it comes to application of some of the rules. Now, there was a question that was asked more than 2 years ago now by the Flight Standards District Office in Arkansas, I believe it was, because they had a question about how do we interpret the rule when it says that a certified mechanic, an A&P mechanic, can supervise someone who is not certificated and their work on aircraft. Now, this happens all the time in the industry. Repair stations, that's one of the ways that they're able to get a lot more work done because they've got unlicensed or uncertificated, I should say, is probably the better word, uncertificated workers doing work that you have to sign off as an A&P mechanic. And that process has worked out very well. That A&P will come back and inspect the work, sometimes looking over the shoulder of that person. But if this is a task that this person has done thousands of times, that mechanic may only come in and just check things at the very end because it's the signature. We all know that it's the signature that returns an aircraft to service and makes that airworthy statement. So there was a question that was asked, and it took the FAA legal department a little over 2 years to provide a response back to the Arkansas FSDO. And the question basically had to do with what does it, with the phrase supervised, that word supervised, what does that really mean? And I've done a lot of research on this, done a lot of reading. You probably have heard some of this come up here in the media not too past few weeks. So the question was, can it be a virtual supervision? Since COVID, we've actually, technology has increased a lot when it comes to virtual, when it comes to meetings and being able to get even just a cell phone camera and shine it someplace to have somebody actually look at it and inspect it. Hey, can you move that around just a little bit? Let me see the backside. Okay, yep, that looks good. Is that acceptable? Is that supervised? That's a good question. Does the mechanic actually have to be on site? Is basically the intention of that question. So again, the statement, be careful what you ask for because you may not like the answer you receive. Well, we didn't like the answer that was given. Basically, the response was from the FAA legal department, the mechanic has to physically watch and be present during the entire process. That is not the way things have been going for years. over 60 years since that rule was first put into place. That's not the way that it's been handled in person in the real world. A mechanic is not looking over the shoulder of the entire process, because if that had to be done, it's faster for the mechanic to just do it themselves. We don't need that person who's an uncertificated worker doing that work if the mechanic has to be right there throughout the entire process. So that's raised a bunch of questions. That's stirred up a big hornet's nest. A lot of the bigger national alphabet groups have kind of been pounding the drum. I will tell you that the Alaska Airmen's Association has reached out to some key folks within the FAA and expressed our concern about what does this mean for Alaska. If you remember last month, I was talking about how we've lost 24% of our mechanics here in the state since COVID. Yeah, we can't continue that trend and be able to maintain the aircraft that we fly here in the state. So what does that mean? Where are we right now in that process? The FAA is receiving those comments. They're going to go back and possibly review what their decision was. Maybe they come back with another clarification. Maybe they pull back some of the statements that they made. Maybe they double down on their statements that they made. I'm not really sure. But that's something that we are watching very closely here at the Alaska Airmen's Association, because it does affect us and our ability to continue to have airworthy aircraft, because there's just not simply enough mechanics. So looking at my list, the next thing that I want to talk about that was a recent change in the Federal Register, if you're a flight instructor, are you aware that your flight instructor certificate no longer expires? This rule change came out just a couple of months after I renewed my CFI. I did an online flight instructor refresher clinic. Very good information through that online eFERC, as we call it. But those are no longer required to reissue your certificate. Now, it's more of a proficiency, just like it is if you haven't done your touch and goes or your landings in the past 90 days, and your instrument approaches and holds and all those things to be instrument current. So there's a same scheme for that for flight instructors now. I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty details of that. If you're not a flight instructor, you probably don't care. If you are a flight instructor, I encourage you to go search on the internet and find out what those changes are. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description of a place where you can go to find out from the Federal Register what those changes have been. So that's a different way to do business. No longer will you be issued a new flight instructor card every 2 years. Your flight instructor certificate will be just like your pilot certificate or mechanic certificate, where you hold on to it and it stays good all the way through. So it was an effort to bring the flight instructor certificate more in line with the other pilot certificates that do not expire. It was also a cost-saving and labor-saving measure by the FAA, by their own admission. They said it's hard for us to keep up with all of these renewals and everything else that they have to do. So they decided to just change it. And so now your flight instructor certificate does not expire. It is just no longer current after those 2 years. And so again, please go online if you're a flight instructor and make sure you are up to speed with what that means and what that looks like for you to keep that current. So I'm going to address something that I have received numerous questions about, reverting back into flight instructor mode. I need to remind a lot of you what the recommended wake turbulence separation is. There was an event in the Mat-Su Valley just outside of Anchorage where an aircraft was damaged by what we think now was wake turbulence. Had a lot of people reach out to me concerned about the heavy traffic, not just volume, but heavy as in the size of the aircraft coming in and out of Anchorage, and the changes in the traffic flow pattern throughout the summer in the Anchorage Bowl. Because of some construction on the sevens, as we call it, the parallel runways there at Anchorage International Airport, runway 7, one of those was shut down off and on throughout the summer. So that put a lot of pressure on 15, the runway that runs pretty much north-south, but obviously on a heading of 150. And so that brought a lot of that heavy traffic up over the Mat-Su Valley down into the Anchorage Bowl. And a lot of folks are concerned about wake turbulence, and we should be. Some of these 747s and 777s and 67s and all the big Airbuses coming in are very heavy, and they do produce a lot of wake turbulence. Now, the recommendation, just to remind you, because folks were saying, well, I don't even want to fly underneath those things. Like, ever? Don't want to fly underneath them? And a couple of folks told me, yeah, I don't want to be under them at any altitude. Well, okay, so let me just remind you what is basically stated by the FAA and what is recommended to do that. And I'm just going to read just a short section here. We do know that what happens with wake turbulence, it comes down and out, right? It just comes down and out away from the aircraft. And so generally those vortices descend at an initial rate of about 300 to 500 feet per minute for about 30 seconds behind that aircraft. And then it gradually decreases to about zero, and as far as a descent rate, when it's between 500 and 900 feet below that aircraft. And so the FAA recommendation is to stay a minimum of 1,000 feet below a heavy aircraft to stay out of their wake turbulence. So, because after it gets down to about 1,000 feet below it, it stops that descent rate and just slowly just keeps working its way further out until it just dissipates and goes away. So, if you want to stay more than 1,000 feet, go for it. Probably not a bad idea. Do you want to never fly underneath a heavy aircraft because it's coming in at a different pattern? And well, then you're never going to be able to fly in the Mat-Su Valley. So be careful about that extra layer of safety, that it is not so constraining that you don't ever want to operate in a particular area. So I will tell you that traffic is going to kind of swing back around to the 7s now that we're in winter as the preferred runway. But next summer, they're going to continue to do some runway maintenance and rebuilding there on those runways again. So we can expect to see some more traffic in the summer of 2025 coming in from the north in doing that. So this is another great reason to have ADSB in, because you'll be able to see those aircraft on your display. Now, I get it. A lot of folks don't have room in a Cub and some other aircraft types to have that, but you can display it on your iPhone and be able to see those things as well. And that gives you an idea of what they're flying at. Now, if you don't know and you don't have that and you want to know what they're doing, very good reason to be talking to Anchorage Approach and talking to them, because they know where those aircraft are, and chances are they know where you are as well, and participate in radar services even if you are not in the Class Charlie airspace. Talk to Anchorage Approach. They'll be able to give you call outs for that heavy traffic and make sure that you are in fact at least 1,000 feet below them, so you don't have to worry about that wake turbulence. So stepping out of flight instructor mode now. One other thing I want to remind you about is the Denali Area System Plan. And the state of Alaska is working through a study right now to see what the aviation needs are for the Denali borough. And you may think, okay, where's the Denali borough? I know where Denali is, the mountain, but where's the Denali borough? So basically, it's south of Fairbanks and north of Talkeetna. That's just easy round numbers, and then east-west along the Alaska Range. What is needed in the Denali borough when it comes to aviation infrastructure? Presently, what's needed in the near future, long term, what are some goals maybe for the Denali borough when it comes to airports and infrastructure? So there's a study going on right now, and they need your input. If you are based in that area, if you fly in that area, if you go up into the Denali National Park and do any flying at all, if you fly up and down the Parks Highway and go through Windy Pass at all, if you're based in the Denali borough, Healy, Cantwell area, they need your input. And so I will put a link in the description as to where you can go to look at that study and be able to find out more about that process and how you can provide your comments. Without good feedback and participation by the pilot community, they're going to have a hard time making some informed decisions. So please do us all a favor, and if you are concerned about that, please go in and write down some comments. All right, looking at our time here, I got time for a few more topics. This may or may not be of interest to you, but it is of interest to the state of Alaska and for folks who fly to and from Alaska from the lower 48. I have done that trip numerous times. The last time I did that trip was right after COVID. All the lockdowns had just relieved, most of them anyway. I actually flew down to the lower 48 right in the height of COVID, and boy, that was an interesting experience. But then coming back, was able to bypass Canada and overfly Canada and go straight from Bellingham to Ketchikan, which made it really nice if you've got the legs to do that in your aircraft. But weather has to be just perfect, and I waited actually a couple of weeks to get that weather window to do that. So why am I telling you all these things? Well, there are some ADSB out requirements for Canada. They have been very slow in implementing these, and they have actually been a little bit behind schedule because of some problems that they've run into with that rollout. Right now, Class A, which is above flight level 180, and in Class Bravo, which would be like Vancouver, there is a ADSB requirement today. Now, Canada is limited only to 1090, the extended squitter. A 978 UAT solution is not acceptable for Canada. And so one of the aircraft I fly has got a 978 out solution, not legal in Canada. 1090 is the only thing that's going to be legal in Canada. But they went space-based, and they have realized they've got some bandwidth constraints, especially in these congested terminal areas around that Class B airspace. And so they are actually starting now. They're not talking much about this, but when you ask them directly, they'll answer in the affirmative. They are putting in some ground stations to pick up those ADSB signals in those terminal areas where the congestion and bandwidth is a concern. We're following this issue very closely. I'm a part of a teleconference that meets every month for getting updates from Transport Canada and NAV Canada and a big industry group that is part of that. And we're following this issue very closely. Canada is aware of our concerns, of our membership, and of U.S. citizens transient through the Canadian airspace. And what does that mean for our ADSB out requirement? And so far, you don't, it's pretty easy to go through Canada and bypass the Vancouver Class B airspace. So right now, that is the solution. Canada's goal, however, is going to make it pretty difficult to get through Canada in the future without an ADSB out solution. But we've got a few years, and we're still working that issue. Hopefully, we'll get some good news there eventually. Now, speaking of ADSB ground stations here in Alaska, I got some great news for you. I was at a meeting last week, and the FAA confirmed that in November, by the end of November, they will be flight checking some of the new ADSB ground stations that they have placed in the state. Now, these are in Kodiak Island, Middleton Island, Johnstone Point, Homer, Gulkana area, and so that's the primary concentration of those, and encouraging to see the coverage that we're going to get from those ground stations and what that's going to mean for us when it comes to getting that information back into the cockpit, being able to get that weather radar, be able to get those METARs and terminal area forecast and all of those things back into the cockpit as we fly in that part of the state. So just one more reason that ADSB might be something you want to contemplate. Now, I totally get it. I understand the concerns of the FAA knowing where your aircraft is all the time and the security concerns from the public knowing where your aircraft is all the time. I get it. I understand it. I wrestle with that same idea myself personally. There are some benefits, however, that are pretty hard to deny when it comes to equipping with ADSB. So if you need more information about that, if you want to talk about that, feel free to reach out to me. Be glad to talk with you about it and let you know what I have found in my studies and research with the Alaska Airmen's Association about potential options and solutions and other things along that way. So just to wrap up here, I want to remind you that the raffle opens back up on Black Friday, October 29th, and you'll be able to buy your tickets again starting on October 29th. Now, my understanding is that these stickers, a lot of you have commented, it's kind of a joke that happened at Oshkosh this year, and the staff in Anchorage kind of ran with it. There are stickers available. Check on the AlaskaAirmen.org website in that merch section, and there might be some stickers that are still available if they haven't sold out already. And want to remind you that we are only posting these videos now on YouTube, but I am linking to them on other social media outlets like Facebook and Instagram. But this is where the videos are going to reside from now on. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up and say goodbye for this edition of Advocacy with Adam. Look forward to talking with you again next month, or maybe sooner if there's something breaking or major that we need to discuss in the meantime.